All right, now we're going to get to our final story today, which is Candace Owens claps back at Ben Shapiro. So Ben Shapiro, he has been on Piers Morgan recently, and also Dave Rubin. We talked about the Piers Morgan interview Friday, I believe. Now we are going to discuss the comments that he made in the Dave Rubin interview. And it is very obvious now that Ben is kind of making the rounds. And Candace has yet to have an interview to speak about her side of the situation of her being removed from the Daily Wire. But Ben has been making the rounds. You know, he kind of got out there first. This is one of those times where I will say that, like, whenever you have this type of situation happen, you know, sometimes it's good to be the first one to get out there and make sure that your voice is heard, particularly if you are the one that was fired, the one that was removed. But time has gone by, and you'll understand why Candace has not done that. You'll understand why she has chosen not to do that. And apparently Ben was supposed to not do that as well, but he is. And here we are. It just goes to show you, once again, you can't trust people. So let's go ahead and get into this conversation that he had with Dave Rubin, because I think, you know, for someone who says they don't want to talk about it, as he told Piers Morgan, I'm not going to talk about it. We're not going to talk about that. He is talking about it. Listen to what he said to Dave Rubin. I think in the beginning here, they're discussing people getting Ben Shapiro wrong. Listen to this.
I think I've hit the bottom of the pessimistic well. It turns out that there are leagues below me, and I can always find new ways to be pessimistic.
All right, so let's do a bunch of stuff here. We've done this over Skype and that kind of stuff a couple of times, even just in the last few months, but it's been a while since we've sat down. I actually have notes here, which I hate having, but I want to kind of cover everything. In some ways, I want to do this as if I had never seen you before or know some of your stuff or interviewed you before, because I think there's a lot of confusion about you and your positions, which is, do you find that odd, like someone who speaks as precisely and fast as you do, that people seem to be confused over your positions?
Yes. And I find it deeply confusing because, again, I'm public record on everything for at least 20 years. I started writing a syndicated column when I was 17. I'm currently 40. So the notion that you have to go far to search for my opinions is strange to me. But the online world is not a real world. And the phrase I've been finding myself using a lot lately is touch some grass. Mm-hmm. And people need to go outside and they need to touch some grass. Like, turn off X, go touch some grass. Turn off.
It's kind of funny the way that he says it. Touch some grass. This is kind of funny. People need to go outside and they need to touch some grass.
Turn off Instagram, go outside, look at the sky. Like the reality is that if you want to know my positions, I've been outspoken about literally all of them. I've not been unclear about them. There are, of course, people who are going to seek to twist those positions into something that they are not. And I understand that's the nature of the game. Nothing has changed there. But the prevalence and speed with which that happens, that has changed. And that's gotten significantly worse over the course of the last few years.
How do you balance that for yourself? Because I talk about it on the show all the time. I mean, we're in this digital world. We're basically existing in the matrix, which I would say if you spend more than 12 hours and 1 second on there, you pretty much are just the battery for the thing. Versus we all go out and about, and at least here in Florida, we have a functional society and we have law and order and things like that. So just contrasting the lunacy that's happening there versus actually, not that everything's great in America, it certainly isn't. We're going to get to it, but there's a huge chasm between those two things.
For sure. And
you guys have problems in Florida too. Don't get on here, Dave, and make it seem like Florida is a perfect state. Florida has its own problems too. There's no such thing as a perfect state. All these states have their issues.
I think that for me, the big move that I made in my life was probably 5-6 years ago now, where my wife turned to me and she said, Twitter, even then, was taking up too much of your time and eating your life. You really need to not have Twitter on your phone. And so I took Twitter off my phone. So what I'll do is I'll check in on specific accounts from the outside of Twitter where I actually have to spend the effort to log in to Twitter and look up what a specific news account is saying, as opposed to just having this scrolling doom feed that is also filled with an echo chamber about you. The notifications button on Twitter is bad. It's gotten way worse since listen, I love that Elon took over X.
You check the Ben Shapiro notifications?
No. I gave that up a long time ago. I will say that it did get significantly worse when I would check on it. since the changes to the blue check.
Yeah.
I mean, the changes to the blue check mark definitely opened up all the floodgates in terms of anyone now being in your notifications. So it made it a lot less usable just in terms of being user-friendly and people you actually cared about commenting on what you were doing. But with all that said, yeah, I really don't check Twitter a lot except for the news when I'm attempting to prep for the show. And I really try never to check the notifications or the comments or anything remotely like that because it is toxicity all the way up, all the way down.
All right. So let's do the elephant in the room for just
Speaking of being toxic, Twitter being toxic, right? And notice how everyone still calls it. We all still call it Twitter, even though Elon, has changed the name to X. I don't think many people are calling it that, but we all still call it Twitter. But speaking of being toxic, I mean, like he's a part of that toxic. He's toxic too on Twitter. It's funny the way he talks about it as if it's everybody else and it's not him. But Ben Shapiro is also toxic on Twitter. Let's get to the elephant in the room.
The moment, because I saw you this week on Piers Morgan. He asked you repeatedly about Candace. You repeatedly basically said,
I won't talk about that. I'll say that here too.
Yeah, and that's fine. And it's interesting because we all sort of came up together to different extents and we've all done a million things together in public events and networks and all of those things. It seems to me that at this moment, she's now a free agent. She happened to end up on Locals, which I created, and we're a platform, not a publisher that you guys are.
Pause. It's interesting. It's kind of funny. He calls her a free agent as if she's an athlete. It's just kind of funny. Like I'm used to hearing people on like First Take, right? Or Undisputed refer to athletes as, oh, so-and-so is a free agent, right? So it's just kind of funny to hear him say it that way. Pay attention to this phrase that they're using called publisher versus platform. Pay close attention to that. Ben Shapiro actually said that in the Piers Morgan interview. Notice Dave Rubin is saying it here again, and you're going to hear Ben say it again as well. And I'm going to explain to you why that actually makes a difference and why I think they're repeating that rhetoric. Let me take it back just for a second. So listen to this part right here.
You repeatedly basically said,
I won't talk about that. I'll say that here too.
Yeah, and that's fine. And it's interesting because we all sort of came up together to different extents and we've all done a million things together in public events and networks and all of those things. It seems to me that at this moment, she's now a free agent. She happened to end up on Locals, which I created, and we're a platform, not a publisher that you guys are.
Locals is a platform, not a publisher that you guys are. So he again is stressing that the Daily Wire is a publisher, not a platform. We'll get into why that actually matters in just a second.
Can you at least talk to just sort of where it's at now? She's not with you. She's free.
She's free to do whatever she wants to do, to be wherever she wants to be. And the difference between a publisher like the Daily Wire and a platform like Locals is obviously that a platform should have a very broad range of speech that it allows, including speech that maybe even the creators don't believe is inside what they would consider to be the Overton window.
Pause, because he likes to talk fast. Notice what he's doing again here, guys. You guys see what he's doing? Once again, they are reiterating that it is a publisher. Okay?
Can you at least talk to just sort of where it's at now? She's not with you. She's free.
She's free to do whatever she wants to do, to be wherever she wants to be. And the difference between a publisher like the Daily Wire and a platform like Locals is obviously that a platform should have a very broad range of speech that it allows, including speech that maybe even the creators don't believe is inside what they would consider to be the Overton window. It's a very different thing than direct subsidization of particular opinions. So the Daily Wire would not pay a host who was staunchly pro-abortion. Mm-hmm. They would have no obligation to pay a host who is staunchly pro-abortion.
Pause. Let me pull up something here for just a second. All right. It was actually one of you that sent this information to me, and I was not aware of this. So thank you so much. I'm not going to say their name because I don't know if they want their name mentioned, but thank you so much. So listen to this. There is a difference. So apparently a publisher can be sued for content that it publishes, whereas a platform cannot be sued for what's posted on it. So why does that matter in reference to Candace Owens being fired at the Daily Wire? Since Ben and Dave keep telling you that the Daily Wire is a publisher, and remember Ben said a publisher does not have to pay you, right? This is their way of talking out of the legal, any type of legality that they could possibly deal with in the future, right? So if they are a publisher and a publisher cannot be sued for the content that it publishes, technically, then that can be sued for the content that it publishes, then that means that the content that is published by Candace, which they deem to be anti-Semitic, at some point down the road, arguably, there could be some type of lawsuit against the Daily Wire for the rhetoric that Candace had. I don't know if you believe her rhetoric was anti-Semitic. Based on what I've heard so far and what I've played on the show, I didn't feel was anti-Semitic, right? But they're throwing this term around to everybody now, right? If you're not overly pro-Israel. So it almost kind of sounds like to me that there has been some type of warning that was given to the Daily Wire, maybe by a donor outside of the Daily Wire, or maybe a pro-Israel group outside of the Daily Wire that maybe sent a warning to the owners of the Daily Wire that if you continue to have her say this rhetoric, we will either pull our money or you could be sued for the content that you are publishing. Whereas with the platform, it says a platform cannot be sued for what's posted on it. Pay attention to that. That's why I think they continue to say that phrase over and over again. Let's go back in.
And so when it comes to the hosts on the Daily Wire, obviously everyone is able to say what they want. Nobody ever comes to me and says, you can't say X. Nobody ever says that to Walsh. And no one ever said that to Candace. But the reality is that there is an Overton window at the Daily Wire. Obviously, there was a non-meeting of the minds. That's pretty much all I can say on this. And, you know, a lot of this has happened publicly. But you know, to the extent that the Daily Wire is, in fact, not a publisher, it is that is, in fact, not a platform, it is a publisher.
You see how he keeps saying that? Let me tell you something, guys. You know, these people were coached, right? So people like Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens, I mean, Ben, I don't know if he still gets coaching now. He probably doesn't anymore, but he could have been coached before this interview. So Ben Shapiro, Candace, like these people were coached. These people had mentors. A lot of us that you see in independent media, especially those of us left independent media, we didn't have a mentor. We didn't have no coach. I didn't have no mentor. I didn't have no coach. I just hooked up my webcam and said, here we go. Let's see what happens, right? So we kind of learn along the way and we stumble, we fall, we get back up, right? And we just keep doing what we're doing, but we had to kind of just learn along the way. But you have to understand, like a publisher, like the Daily Wire, they have a lot of money. So these people, they have money to have people come in and coach them and things like, how do you guys think that like Candace Owens and all the other people that are part of the Daily Wire, you think they were like that right out the gate? No, they were coached. So Ben could have even been coached before this interview. Don't know for sure, but just notice how he keeps saying it's a publisher. That is his way of letting you know that the Daily Wire can't be held accountable for firing Candace Owens because they're not a platform. Let's continue.
That means that there is no moral obligation for the Daily, and there's no free speech problem with the Daily Wire saying we don't wish to pay a particular host, or that host saying I don't wish to work here anymore, because again, there's a parting of the ways that is not really open for discussion at this point.
Does it surprise you that so many people, even on our side of this, are confused about that as it relates to free speech and quote unquote cancel culture? Like severing a business tie, as long as you're not throwing someone in jail, they're able to be everywhere else, is not.
I'm not super surprised with the controversy, honestly, because to a certain extent, I think that there's been a reaction on the right to the excesses of the left. So because what the left did is they said that the Overton window ought to be closed so tight that no one can get inside the Overton window. Basically, if you're to the right of Hillary Clinton, you can't be allowed inside the Overton window.
World,
yes, exactly. and not just with regard to platforms, but with regard to publishers. So, for example, this week, NBC News deciding that Ronna McDaniel was too much for them. Ronna McDaniel can't work at NBC.
See, once again, he's making the comparison between a platform and a publisher.
News, the sacred halls of NBC News must not be sullied by the former head of the RNC. Jen Psaki, however, can have a show on MSNBC despite being the press secretary for the White House 5 seconds ago. Right? The right's response to that is, I think, correct to say you guys have shut the Overton window too tight. But I think some elements of the right have basically said there is no Overton window. The Overton window should be completely exploded. with regard not just to platforms, with which I kind of agree, but with regard to publishers. So NBC News not only has an obligation to hire Ronna McDaniel, NBC News has the obligation to hire Alex Jones, for example.
Right. Which
I don't think
just
that's
makes
true.
no sense at a business level beyond free speech. I mean, there's a reason that networks exist.
Right, they have editorial
yeah.
positions.
Yeah.
Daily Wire has a very strong editorial position on a wide variety of issues. And by the way, I should say that, there are a lot of people who are suggesting this is about disagreements over Israel. I mean,
pause. So do you see him put his foot in his mouth a little bit here? Watch. So again, because they are a publisher, the Daily Wire has editorial rights. So there are things they can choose to keep. There are things they can choose not to keep. So if the Daily Wire does have that editorial position, that means they can also decide what content they want to be published. So when Ben Shapiro tells you, well, we never told anybody what they could or could not say, maybe not. But if you have that editorial position, you can still tell them what they can or cannot say because you control the content. If you are a publisher, you decide what you want to publish and what you don't want to publish. So you don't have to physically go to Candace and say, you're not allowed to talk about this anymore. But if you're the one that decides whether or not the information is going to be published, in a way, you're still doing some type of censorship. So listen to this part.
Alex Jones, for example.
Right.
I don't think
just
that's
makes
true.
no sense at a business level beyond free speech. I mean, there's a reason that networks exist.
Right, they have editorial
yeah.
positions.
Yeah.
Daily Wire has a very strong editorial position on a wide variety of issues. And by the way, I should say that, there are a lot of people who are suggesting this is about disagreements over Israel. I mean, I can safely say it is not about disagreements over Israel to the extent that, without reference to Candace at all here, Matt Walsh has taken the position that America ought not be involved in the Middle East at all. Matt Walsh's position, so far as I understand it, and I've talked to him about it, is that Israel, in a conflict between Israel and Hamas, Israel is obviously a more moral party than the genocidal terrorist group Hamas, but also it's very far away. He doesn't care and it doesn't involve America. That's just a pure isolationist position. I disagree with it. I think it's wrong. I think that it's short-sighted. But
what Matt Walsh has said and what Candace Owens have said are two different things. So Matt Walsh is still pro-Israel. It's not the same. And Ben probably shouldn't have done this interview. And I'm going to show you why in just a second, because he just told you this has nothing to do with Israel, right? Okay, I'm going to prove to you that's wrong. Let me let him finish.
Again, he's on our platform. That is well within the range of acceptable discourse at the Daily Wire. So, the notion that you have to mirror my exact perspectives on what Israel is doing in Gaza is obviously not true, based on the roster of hosts that we currently have. There are a lot of other factors, obviously, at play.
Okay, so let's see if Ben is telling the truth, right? Because I did a little bit of digging here. Let's go in. We're going to talk about the lack of self-awareness. This is really interesting. Someone pulled up of this clip here of Ben Shapiro, and it's from @legendary_energy, says the lack of self-awareness in this statement is incredible. Listen to what Ben said here.
I want to talk about the rise of conspiracy theories on all sides. I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but I want to talk about this more at length because the conspiratorial victimhood cult now infuses pretty much every side of the political out. I wish it were restricted to the far progressive left. It is not. It has now pervaded pretty much every area of American political life. Every politician declares that everyone, is a member of a victim group. Victimhood politics all the way down. The only question is, who is the conspiratorial force and who is the victim? But everyone is under the bizarre belief that they are being victimized in the freest society in human history. Now I want to talk about the rise of conspiracy theories on all sides.
So there's Ben Shapiro talking about himself, because Ben Shapiro's out here claiming he's the ultimate victim. So Candace apparently has decided to respond. Now, she hasn't said anything to him, I think, since this all happened. But now she's speaking out because Glenn Greenwald also talked about the same interview that I just played, that clip there. Glenn Greenwald had some things to say as well. And Candace actually retweeted this and said, Ben, we agreed not to talk about this, but you are very much going on a public tour right now, pretending not to talk about it while you are very much talking about it. Would you like me to do the same? So apparently at some point or another, I guess Candace and Ben had some type of agreement behind the scenes that they were not going to talk about this publicly. But now you see Ben Shapiro on another show talking about this, saying, I'm not going to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it, but I'm talking about it. So apparently Ben decided to break his promise. Imagine that. But there are things that happen behind the scenes. And so Censored Men actually put this out. Candace Owens' Daily Wire email leak. So here we go. This was the email sent to employees at the Daily Wire informing them of the impromptu town hall Jeremy Boring, CEO, had organized. So Jeremy Boring, excuse me. Employees were told not to bring cell phones to the meeting and that independent contractors would not be allowed to attend. The contractors couldn't come there. Interesting. At the town hall, Daily Wire leadership attempted to smear Owens as an anti-Semite in front of their employees to justify her firing. Black bars hide personal details and company positions to prevent doxing. So they covered up that information, and you'll see it here. Forward Town Hall today at 4 p.m. CST. Please note that this is a private employee only town hall, so please do not bring independent contractors along to the meeting. Also, please leave all cell phones at your desk. No phones will be permitted at the town hall. That was probably to prevent someone from recording what was being discussed in that meeting. Interesting. And then you can see the email was sent March 19th. That was Tuesday, 2024 at 1:04 p.m. Town hall today at 4 p.m. So that's one of those emergency meetings. I've had those sent to me when I was working at some of the academic institutions as well. That's when you know that's not a good thing. And it goes on to say here, please join us for a mandatory town hall at 4 p.m. CST today at 9:90. Please make your way over in a timely manner and be sure to be seated by 3:45 p.m. So yeah, and they're actually retweeting the other one that they showed last week. Now, Candace retweeted this and responded and said, I was not aware of this. Maybe me and Joe Rogan should get together and talk about it while pretending we're not talking about it. So you see what's happening here? So if Candace Owens is telling you that she was not aware of that email, that means that the Daily Wire left her off of the email invite. So they sent it to all of the employees except for her. So she is now saying, and she tagged Joe Rogan in this tweet and saying, maybe me and Joe Rogan should get together and talk about it while pretending not talking about it. Right? So if Joe Rogan takes her up on this interview, he's had her on the show before, it'll be really interesting to hear her side of the story, what comes out from her perspective. Ben really can't get mad at her at this point because this is the second show that he's gone on to talk about it while he's saying he's not talking about it, which is really interesting. But what's also funny too is that if this conversation happens with Candace Owens and Joe Rogan, remember Joe Rogan has a massive platform, right? It's the largest podcast or something like that on Spotify. So millions of people are going to hear Candace's side of the story versus how many people watch that interview from Dave Rubin or the interview with Piers Morgan, right? So there's that. And then Joe Rogan will probably be fair and invite Ben Shapiro on to tell his side as well. And then Joe Rogan will agree with whoever is sitting in front of him at that point in time, because that's what Joe tends to do. Now, there was a Twitter space with Jeremy Boring, the CEO, and I want to show you something else that was revealed here. This, again, was after Candace's firing. So listen to this piece here.
I'd like to ask a little bit more about Candace Owens being fired by the Daily Wire. I just want to preface this to say, I was an organizational psychologist for a while. I worked with a lot of organizations that were quite frankly larger than the Daily Wire in terms of, helping them with staffing issues, working through the employees to fire, things like that. Jeremy, I'm just wondering, and I guess I'm asking this as a yes or no question. Did Candace Owens violate any specific policies at the Daily Wire? And I'm not asking you to tell us which policies. I'm just asking, was she fired because she violated a company policy?
So that question is being asked to Jeremy Boring, again, who is the CEO.
I'm not going to make any comment about the Daily Wire separation from Candace Owens in this forum.
So that's no then. Just to be clear with everyone, that's no. She did not violate any company policies.
Well, I don't.
We're not. Very sneaky way of ascribing to me an answer that I did not give.
If she violated a company policy, you would have been able to say yes to the question, Jeremy. I know that much.
Okay, so Candace is not here. This is not about Candace specifically.
Okay, so they were trying to get him to acknowledge whether or not she violated any type of policy, but there's more to that Twitter space as well. Now, this woman here, her name is Carlin Borisenko. I think I'm pronouncing her incorrectly. She actually says here, I made the Daily Wire CEO admit he won't hire anyone like Candace Owens, who is critical of Israel. This is probably the most damning thing that came from that Twitter space. So listen to this, guys. This is very telling, and it lets you know that Ben Shapiro was lying on Dave Rubin.
So basically, that's a little bit too loud. Okay, so basically what I asked to set this up is I said, Jeremy, I have a hypothetical question for you. And I'll get the full clip up to YouTube at some point. I said, Jeremy, I have a hypothetical question for you. If you have in front of you the greatest, like one of the greatest conservative commentators like that you've ever seen, the next Jordan Peterson, this person has a track record of 20 years of a portfolio. You know where they stand. They've been consistent. This person is they've been great on economic issues. They've been great on social issues. This person is going to get millions of views. They're going to sell a whole bunch of books. They're going to do everything you want them to do. They are an excellent business decision. They have a tried and true track record. If you had that person standing in front of you and that person was making some of the same criticisms of Israel that Candace Owens was making, would that person have a job at the Daily Wire?
Let me pause. Did everybody hear that? Now, she said if that person had like a 20-year track record, which I don't think Candace Owens even had a 20-year track record at the time that the Daily Wire hired her. I don't even think Candace is that old. I think she's still fairly young, like in her 30s, right? Okay, so just keep that in mind. So basically what she's proposing to him is someone who actually had even more experience than Candace Owens did. Listen to this. Listen to what he says. This is very revealing.
And so I asked this question, and then Jeremy pretended he didn't understand it, and he tried to deflect, and he tried to say, well, this is about Candace Owens being fired. And I said, no, that's not what it's about. This is a hypothetical person. This is a fictional person. Does this person have a job at the Daily Wire if they hold the same views as Candace Owens on Israel? Let's listen what happened. Next, Jordan Peterson going to sell millions of books, going to make you guys millions of dollars, getting millions of views on every video they post, but they've made the same criticisms Candace has made in the last 6 months. Does that person have a job?
Yeah, I'm not, even this is too close to the Candace thing for me to speak to because I feel like there are implications of this that I'm not willing to engage in. But if your question is, would I hire, would I hire Bill Whittle if Bill Whittle suddenly said that there's a genocide going on in Gaza? No, I don't think that that's a person that I would hire at the Daily Wire.
So you guys heard that, right? So that is the CEO of the Daily Wire basically saying that if he had this person that said there's a genocide going on in Gaza, no, I don't think I would hire that person at the Daily Wire. So doesn't that debunk what Ben Shapiro said in the interview to Dave Rubin, where he said, this is not about Israel. You don't have to have the same views that I have on Israel. This is not about that. That's not, why Candace was fired. Here's the CEO telling you the exact opposite. I told you guys it before, I don't agree with Candace Owens on a lot of things politically. I just don't. I don't agree with her a lot politically. I consider myself to be more of a socialist. She considers herself to be conservative. So politically, we really do not agree on a lot of things. But just because we don't agree politically doesn't mean that what they're doing isn't bullshit. Like, that's the thing. It's bullshit.
That doesn't align with very core beliefs for me. I don't want to promote that idea in the world. Why would I give that guy my money? And you say make millions of dollars off of these guys.
Pause. So you hear what he just said? It does not, he said it does not align with his core beliefs. So again, Ben Shapiro was lying to Dave Rubin when he said, no, you don't have to share the same position on Israel. According to the CEO, you do.
As though these hosts generate money and I siphon it off the top. But that's, of course, not true. I'm an integral part in building the brands of these hosts, of promoting the brands of these hosts. I spend millions of dollars of marketing behind every one of my hosts. I lose a lot of money on my hosts for a long time. Even the ones that are very, very big often make no money at all and cost a lot of money for the first several years that I work with them. Why would I make investments in people if I largely disagree with some major part of their... in the same sense, I wouldn't hire a pro-choice person to work for me. Although, certainly there are conservatives out there who have spotless records on any number of other aspects of what I might consider the conservative platform.
I think the difference is that obviously if you're conservative, right, or if you're a conservative publishing company or whatever, obviously there are certain policies that are going to align with conservatism, right? But when it comes to Israel, though, that's something that both parties support. Both parties are pro-Israel. Both parties support the state of Israel, at least the politicians anyway, in DC. But now it's gotten to the point where he is basically saying that if you're not pro-Israel, if you're saying there's a genocide going on in Gaza, if you don't align with him when it comes to the views about Israel, he's saying he would not hire that person. Israel is not the United States of America. Why does someone have to be pro-Israel for you to hire them? This is probably the most damning thing right here, is this space.
But why would I pay them when they go against something that I believe at a very deep level, which to me is a somewhat fundamental level? No, I would not.
Ben Shapiro has some explaining to do, right? So if he's letting you know that he wouldn't hire that person, what's stopping him from firing that person? Sam Parker came in with the hit. Sam Parker said, RIP Daily Wire after this. So here we... Oh my God. Weekend at the Daily Wire. So they took Weekend at Bernie's. So here's Ben Shapiro. And I think that's Jeremy. I think that's Jeremy Boring trying to prop up and hold up the Daily Wire. This is too much. This is too much. And then we have one more final thought here from Candace, which she calls out hypocrisy. Again, I told you, so much hypocrisy. She said, right-wing Jews have long decried this evil eye perspective, and rightfully so. And yet in the last few years, many of these Jews, the very same one who can't stand when liberals call Donald Trump and every other conservative racist, have been calvering, calling people they dislike anti-Semites. There's been a lot of hypocrisy happening, folks. Maybe that conversation with her and Joe Rogan will happen. I don't know. Until then, I guess we'll just have to stick around and see whose show Ben pops up on next and says that he doesn't want to talk about it, but talks about it. Let's go to some of the comments here. Piano Man says, Daily Liar. JB says, oh, so now it's not cancel culture. If you don't throw them in jail, they move the goalpost.